coming up.
So, Minister, when were you first informed that Minister Guilbeault's department was discussing cancelling prescribed burns because of political optics?
Minister, it's pretty shocking that you won't give a direct answer to that question, but I will move on to my next question.
Point of order.
In your opening remarks, you said that there was, you left no stone unturned. The Government of Canada left no stone unturned when it came to preparing for the fire that happened that destroyed almost $1 billion worth of personal property, left a couple thousand people homeless, and actually resulted in the death of unfortunately, of a brave firefighter. I don't believe actually that that's statement that you made in your opening remarks is true.
Point of order.
Yes.
Like and subscribe.
Okay, so we're off and running, and we can proceed now with hearing from our Minister of Emergency Preparedness.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair, colleagues. Thank you for inviting me here today so I can appear before you. I know that honourable members and Canadians are seeking answers and want to hear about the events that unfolded in Jasper.
Thank you, Minister. We'll start the first round off with Mr. Soroka for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be sharing about the last 2 minutes with MP Mazur. Minister Guilbeault called the wildfire in Jasper a success. A third of the town was destroyed, thousands are homeless, and nearly $1 billion in damage. Did his failure to implement proper mitigation go against your job to prepare for this emergency?
So what I can tell you is when I visited Jasper, the command center, and the town itself, alongside with the mayor, the premier, and our ministers, and especially Minister Ellis, the briefing that we got, if it wasn't for the preparation that Jasper had taken, the Fire Smart program that was conducted, more importantly, the training and the coordinated training that all the different agencies had done, I think just a few months prior, that led to not only saving the town, but making sure that the evacuation was very successful and done quickly.
Okay. The wildfire in Jasper was a disaster waiting to happen, with experts and officials raising alarms for over 8 years. When were you first informed, either by Minister Guilbeault or any other member of the Liberal government, that Jasper was a tinderbox ready to ignite? When and by whom?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't agree with that assessment. When you look at across the country, British Columbia, Alberta, the forecast that we were seeing with the extreme heat, there were many parts of the country that we know, because of the extreme heat, is prone to wildfires. When did I first know of the wildfire that took place? It was just actually, I believe, a few days before that the evacuation took place. When we were informed, well, one thing we always make sure through the Government Operations Center, to making sure that all the resources are in place, and do they have all that was needed, and everything that we were told at that time, additional resources were being moved in, and that things were being held at that time until those gusts of wind that I was talking about that made the situation extremely worse, that have never happened apparently in Jasper before.
But Minister, I think you're forgetting the fact that, the mountain pine beetle, there was a lot of dead trees. I'm not saying there wasn't fire smarting in town. Mm-hmm. The problem is the fire smarting wasn't done further back, like a mile or 2 miles. That's where the problem was. You had huge amounts of fuel sitting there, essentially dead trees that could ignite at any time. And yes, once that got fire started there, the problem was you were not going to stop it. That's our point, is why was those trees not removed? So, when and how were you informed that there should have been more done?
So, as the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, my job is to look at responding to the emergency. What I'll tell you, what I was briefed upon when I was on the ground, I'll let Parks Canada and others explain further if they need to on this. When I was briefed is the fire smarting that actually took place, the wall of flame that was reported. If it wasn't for the fire smarting that was done, the wall of flame would have kept going. They actually would stop. It was because of those winds that had never taken place before, that 100 kilometers per hour, that gusted up to 150 kilometers per hour, that launched those pine cones that were on fire and branches into the town, that actually set the town on fire. But for everything that we were briefed on, that if it wasn't for the preparation that had taken place, that the situation would have been much worse.
Okay, I won't get into the severe winds in mountain areas, but I'll pass it on to MP Mazur.
Thank you. Minister, you're responsible for emergency preparedness. Do you agree with prescribed burns help prevent wildfires? Yes or no?
First, I'm not the expert on how to deal with that. The experts would have to look at, because I have seen where certain places.
Minister, the question was pretty straightforward. Do you agree that prescribed burns help prevent wildfires? Yes or no?
It all depends on which area. Each expert, for example, in the Yukon,
Minister, I'll tell you, they do actually help. So, Minister, documents obtained by suggest that Minister Guilbeault's department was working against your mandate. A senior official at Parks Canada wrote in an email months before the Jasper wildfires, and I quote, "At what point do we make the organizational decision to cancel prescribed burns in Western Canada?" Then the official stated, and I quote, "Political perception may become more important than actual prescription windows." Minister, newly obtained emails now reveal that this discussion was so alarming, the Executive Director of Conservation replied, begging Parks Canada to put forest management above politics. And I quote, "I hope we don't get into a blanket shutdown," she said. Quote, "It is critical to continue those kind of burns. It is how they maintain the community fuel break, and when they fall behind, it is very difficult to catch up." End quote. So, Minister, when were you first informed that Minister Guilbeault's department was discussing cancelling prescribed burns because of political optics?
First of all, I think those questions were answered already early.
Je crois qu'on a déjà répondu à ces questions. Je vous posais la question à vous.
Minister, any opportunity to respond to his question.
I'm sensitive to the badgering of witnesses. I don't think it's really that severe in Mr. Mazur's case. Go ahead. Wait.
Je crois qu'il y a un petit problème dans la traduction.
OK, est-ce que vous comprenez? Est-ce qu'on entend? C'est bon? OK, alors, Monsieur Mazur, continuez, là, mais donnez la chance.
Please continue. Please continue.
I'll ask you again, Minister. When were you first informed that Minister Guilbeault's department was discussing cancelling prescribed burns because of political optics?
I can only tell you what I have been briefed on when I have visited Jasper. I
So
deal
you
with
were-
the emergency
were you aware?
response. I don't get into what takes place in each community across the country.
Were you
we
aware?
look at responding. No, I wasn't.
Thank you. How much time?
15 seconds. 10 seconds.
I'm good. Thank
We also heard that the Alberta government had decided to reduce their firefighting budget by $30 million. Was that ever discussed, and did that have an impact? Because we heard that certain types of equipment weren't available that were there, and was there ever a conversation about the need to keep the budgets for firefighting increasing rather than decreasing?
What I can say that when it comes to Jasper or Alberta actually collaborates really well when it comes to not only wildfires but emergency management. In fact, actually, it's one of the things in emergency preparedness or especially when emergency is called. I've never had to deal with any partisan issues, right? We deal with the emergency, work very closely together. I would have to say that my closest relationship is actually with Minister Ellis.
Right.
And that's why one of the reasons why when we were informed what was taking place, I decided to go to Edmonton and work with Minister Ellis and coordinate our resources directly. They made all resources available as quickly as possible, and I want to commend them for their efforts. The Premier was with us when we got their briefing, and I would have to say the briefing that we got, the preparation and the work that was done, it was actually far greater than any other place I've actually have witnessed. If it wasn't for the fire smarting, if it wasn't for the preparation, the training, the entire town could have been lost. They went into when I arrived. And the interesting part was, it was Parks Canada folks. They had Canada Task Force 2 from Calgary that was there, and also Alberta Fire working very closely. Very direct questions were actually asked. In fact, everybody talked about how well not only the preparation was taking place, but I would say some members were talking about how they need to look at utilizing this in other parts of the province and even across the country.
Thank you. That's fantastic to hear that that collaboration was there and everyone worked so smoothly. I'm wondering, there was talk of certain equipment like water bombers not being available. I guess they're called water bombers or air tanker groups from either Alberta or British Columbia at that time. Would that have made a difference if they had been there given the nature of the fire?
No, in fact, actually, water bombers were made available, and Derek, I think you can do more. Derek runs the Government Operations Center, provide more details.
Okay.
Water bombers actually were made available,
Great.
but when we and everybody looks at it as why weren't they used? It's the incident commander on the ground has to take a look at when it's safe to do so. And when we visited, they clearly showed there was it would have been absolutely dangerous for them to be able to use the water bombers at that time. Helicopters that had night vision capability were also made available as well. But it's incident commander on the ground that has to make the decision. But Derek, if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, Derek Traherne, Government Operations Center. So the minister is correct. I mean, those decisions are made by the incident commander, and there was a unified command that was sort of set up there with the municipality and the province and parks as well. So they make those calls. There were no shortages of water bombers or equipment across the country this summer. We had a very significant fire season, which I'm happy to speak to at length, but there were no major gaps in availability of either firefighters or equipment. And we saw fires across the country starting in the east and moving west, and then the west and obviously got 60-70% of the fires this year. But Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC, and others are some of the strongest emergency management agencies in the country and have significant assets at their disposal. So that's decisions that are made on the ground, but we never saw any shortages during the season.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Your experience with disasters, Minister, you're a former military man. I'd like to get your perspective, and I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I'd like to get a direct answer. Knowing what you know now about what happened in Jasper, was it a mistake for the government not to conduct more mechanical clearing operations and more prescribed burns to protect the town site of Jasper?
What I can tell you, and what I was briefed on the ground with the Premier and the Alberta Wildfire Service, that everything that could have been done was done. And I believe Mayor Ireland can attest to that.
I think you're avoiding the question here. I understand that Alberta Emergency Management of the town may have done everything they could have done in terms of fire smart, in terms of positioning emergency response equipment to react to a fire once it happened. But I'm asking about what happened before, in the years before the fire started, in the years since 2017 when Ken Hodges and other scientists warned your government that not taking action on mechanical clearing and prescribed burns to protect the town of Jasper was setting up the town of Jasper for a catastrophe. Knowing what you know now, Minister, and with your extensive experience, will you say whether or not it was a mistake for Parks Canada not to more extensively clear the forest and use prescribed burns to protect the town of Jasper?
The only thing I can tell you is what I have been briefed on when we were involved with the emergency, and what we were briefed on the ground with all the Alberta from the Premier and other ministers, that everything that could have been done was done. In fact, if the preparation hadn't taken place, that the whole town could have been lost.
Well, Minister, we could have avoided the town being burned down at all if we had taken extensive action to clear the dead pine beetles that scientists warned your government needed to be cleared in order to prevent the fire in Jasper. I'm asking you, Minister, one last time. You saw it with your own eyes. You saw what happened. Are you not willing to admit that clearing more forest and using more prescribed burns could have prevented the town of Jasper from being burned down?
So what we do is we'll be going through a lessons learned to determine what are the lessons that we can learn to be able to apply not only for that area, but for also the rest of the country as well.
Minister, it's pretty shocking that you won't give a direct answer to that question, but I will move on to my next question.
Point of order?
Hold my time, please.
Yes, Ms. Taylor.
Yeah, I just find the member opposite, is being, questioning the minister's integrity by repeating that question.
That's not true,
and
but
then
that's
saying
not a point of order.
Questioning that again. And it's Standing Order 18, by the way.
It's not a point of order. It's not a point of order, but
I appreciate the break, though. Thank you.
okay. Let's continue, but let's be respectful, I guess. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll move on to my next question, Minister. You did talk about a time of reflection, and I think that is important, but we need not just to reflect, we need to take action. I've been told by scientists and people on the ground that the town of Jasper is still at significant risk, particularly to the northwest of town where there still is significant stands of pine beetle-infested dead pine trees that pose a significant risk to the town. What is Parks Canada doing immediately to prepare the town of Jasper to face this risk so that we don't have a repeat of what we had this last summer?
So because I can only answer for my portfolio, what I can tell you is we have learned from whether it's Fort McMurray, West Kelowna, Enterprise, and we try to share those lessons, and we will be making sure that all the lessons that have been learned here will be applied not only to that area but for others. And what I've also been assured is looking at what else needs to be done. And this is one thing that I took away from Mayor Ireland, who's personally had to deal with the devastation of losing his own home, is the work that needs to be done. They have to do.
Minister, I'll have to cut you off because I've given you some time there. What needs to be done is we need to start clearing these trees, and we need to take action to prevent the fire from hitting Jasper and other towns in the Rocky Mountain National Park and our other national parks that are at risk. But I'll move on to my next question, Minister. You know, the way that you're speaking here at committee, I think it would be more appropriate if your ministry was the Ministry of Emergency Response, because I'm not seeing a lot of preparedness from your government. What role did you take in the years and the months leading up to this Jasper fire to prepare Jasper and other towns and national parks, which are under federal jurisdiction, for the threat of wildfires? You as Minister of Emergency Preparedness, what did you do?
So our role in emergency preparedness, one of the things we do is look at on the prediction of where potentially fires can take place. We have made that information available as far as possible. The other aspect, one of the things we have prepared is making sure that evacuees need the support. That's one of the things that we also learned from last year, and the humanitarian workforce program played a very important role in that. When it comes to the preparedness side, that's a shared responsibility that happens with the provinces and the municipalities to be able to work together.
Thank you. I only have 30 seconds left, Minister. I have given you some good time to answer that. What day did Alberta make a request for assistance with Jasper? What day did the request for assistance come to you?
Well, the actual first request that was made was actually not for Jasper. We were actually...
I'm asking for the one for Jasper specifically, though, Minister.
But I need to... I'm trying to explain to you the actual how the situation took place. It wasn't just like a one moment then another. When I was on the phone with Minister Ellis throughout the day, we were actually looking at providing support for northern Alberta, while literally at the same time the situation in Jasper is deteriorating. So we didn't even look at where the resources were going. We were dealing with Jasper, and then the decision was made during my visit is to shift the resources, and that was their decision to make.
What day, Minister?
Thank you. Time's up. Time's up. I'm sorry.
22nd of July.
Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Van Koeverden.
You know, what forest management techniques could be considered while we also undertake Canada's responsibility to mitigate climate change, because we have such a responsibility to do so?
Absolutely. No, thank you very much for the question. And one of the things in this portfolio especially, I make it a point, and any emergency that I've dealt with, conversation I have, we don't politicize. I work with many different provinces of various parties who are in government at this time, and we work on dealing with the issue. If there's concern, we deal with it directly, and have some very good relationships, and especially with Alberta, because at the end of the day, climate change is having an impact, whether you call it that or something else. Reality is the reality, right? It's going to hit, and we all do need to be prepared for it, and that's what we have been doing. I have to admit, based on what I have seen in Jasper, with what Parks Canada and all the experts on the ground, if you could be there for that briefing, right? All of them said that they've done everything in their power. That Mother Nature could not have stopped what was coming.
Thank you.
But yes, there's work to be done all across the country.
In your opening remarks, you said that there was you left no stone unturned. The government of Canada left no stone unturned when it came to preparing for the fire that happened that destroyed almost $1 billion worth of personal property. Left a couple thousand people homeless, and actually resulted in the death of unfortunately, of a brave firefighter. I don't believe actually that statement that you made in your opening remarks is true.
Point of order?
Yes. Who called the point of order? Ms. Taylor-Roy?
Yeah, Standing Order 18 on order and decorum does say that remarks which question the member's integrity, including a minister, are not allowed. And I think that what that member just said directly questioned the minister's integrity.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
Well, you know, I wouldn't be maybe as direct, Mr. Calkins, about that, but you can go continue.
I suppose in the quest for the truth then, Minister, I take umbrage with the comment that you made. The no stone unturned comment is frustrating for me because I am acutely aware of efforts that have been made, and you have referred to private sector partners. Are you aware, Minister, that private sector partners were actually en route to Jasper and were actually turned away from coming to do fire suppression in the town of Jasper?
Well, first of all, to your accusation there is wrong because what I was talking about, no stone unturned. At that time, I was talking about the emergency preparedness for the overall country.
Well, let's
explore
Mr.
that. Chair,
please,
I've been very polite in front now. If I mean, either I answer or not,
I think I'm interested to know what the minister's answer
so
is.
I'm trying to clarify. If you're accusing me of something, what I was talking about is from previous wildfires, we've been working, trying to learn the lessons from there and trying to share those across the country. That's when it comes to no stone unturned, right? It's obviously impossible for us to look at every single community across the country. And when it comes to those resources, yes, I can assure you that that was not the case. I spoke directly with Minister Ellis about this, and that was not the case. When those concerns were actually raised, it was addressed on the ground during the actual visit itself. And all of us, and so the minister responsible for emergency preparedness, right, we were there when said that this was not an actual issue. Any resources that were needed were made available and that were put to use by the incident commander as we were briefed.
Your comments also about saying that no fire team could have stopped it. If my allegation is actually true that fire suppression private sector partners were actually turned away en route to Jasper, how would you know if it wasn't, if these folks wouldn't have been able to stop it at all? They have a very clear track record. As a matter of fact, they're under contract with the province of Alberta. The province of Alberta would not have stopped this company from coming into Jasper. The fire started 4 days before it reached the town. It sat on somebody's desk because this company had years of negotiations with Parks Canada on fire suppression. They have mobile devices that can be deployed to this, and they have told me specifically that they were turned around. As a matter of fact, they show on the video the footage of the news where their fire suppression units were turned around. Minister, are you very sure in what you're telling me right now that no stone was left unturned and that nobody that could have prevented the fire in Jasper from destroying those buildings, nobody was turned away? Are you sure?
First of all, when it comes to the management of the fires, the incident commanders on the ground make the calls. And also, when I was with Minister Ellis, I think you also need to speak with Minister Ellis if you really want to be sure, because at the same time, he was also directly involved. So I would say that some of the accusations that you are making.
I used the word allegation,
sorry,
Minister.
my mistake.
If we're going to be nice to each other, it goes both ways.
My apologies. I take that back. No, that was looked at. That's one of the reasons why I actually went to Edmonton to work with Minister Ellis directly to making sure that if there were any confusion, it could be addressed.
What is it, Mr. Calkins?
No, I don't want to interrupt. I can do two things at once. I was listening to the minister. I was simply asking you how much time I have left.
Oh, okay, 45 seconds. Yeah.
One of the key things was we need to make sure that for example, what happens is there's a lot of requests that end up coming. Incident commander on the ground is making decisions. What we needed to do is making sure that the Alberta Provincial Operations Center had the right people. We actually, that time speaking with Parks Canada, inserted people in their operations center so that the appropriate people can make the appropriate decision based on the resources on the ground.
Minister, will you undertake to provide to this committee all documents pertaining to the procurement of equipment as well as contracts with private sector partners relating to the fire suppression and mitigation in Jasper National Park since 2017?
But that is, just to clarify here, the province is in charge of the management of the resources. We provide resources in addition to Parks Canada.
The government of Alberta does not
and then
run
we
parks,
also provide. I'm just telling you what was taking place on the ground. And I'm sure Parks Canada can provide the appropriate information.
Will you undertake to make sure those documents are provided?
I can't give you that because I am the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, right? I don't have the authority to provide any of those type of work. We can only provide based on what my responsibility is. So.
Some of the claim that we've heard in the House of Commons by Conservative that, fighting climate change is actually will do nothing to stop wildfires.
I would say if right now in our country and the rest of the world, climate change is having a devastating impact. We need to fight it. If the situation gets worse, our preparation, how do we end up keeping up with Mother Nature? We have a responsibility. It's going to be too late if we don't end up fighting climate change. And just look at the last 10 years. I mean, Canadians are seeing, towns that are being completely evacuated. Our towns are being burned. People are being devastated by this. We have to fight climate change. And if we don't do as much as we can, just imagine the pattern that we're seeing now getting worse. My worry is our resources, we will run out of resources. Then what will we do? And last year was a perfect example where, fortunately, we had a lot of international firefighters. We are adding more firefighters as needed. But in addition to wildfires, we're also dealing with not just regular floods with atmospheric rivers. One of the biggest one of the bigger concerns that I have right now is actually flash flooding because of the climate change. And to add even greater complexity to it, places where there has been the ground has been burnt 4 or 5 feet deep into the ground. Now is that with additional rain, you got additional flood risk as well. So this whole situation is going to compound even further. So we do need to do our part to fight climate change. Otherwise, I'll be honest, let's put it this way: for anybody who's going to realize, it'll be by the time certain people realize, it's going to be too late.